Do you want to shoot your bow or gun or crossbow from very far away? Then marksmanship can be the spec for you in Dragonflight beta, since that's basically what it does. It shoots things from very far away, and we have covered marksmanship before, and it keeps going with more and more changes going into the garage of fixing the specs for Dragonflight. And although it's not necessarily a bad spec, it has received some improvements, some big, some not, and that's what we're going to be looking at today, since right now we're kind of done with the design and we're going into the tuning as with all specs in all videos. First of all, since we haven't covered Hunter in a while, in the general talent tree, we have seen some swaps, and mostly in the middle side of the talent trees, with some added towards the bottom where the capstones are, and some rearrangement things. Firstly, Entrapment is a new talent that roots enemies hit by Tar Trap, appeared in the place of what we had before as Rejuvenating Winds, which was moved in place of Improved Traps that took the spot of Hunter's Avoidance. So you can see there's been a lot of things that have been swapped here and there and everywhere. And Hunter's Avoidance is now a 1-pointer and is right under the choice node with Binding Shot. This is particularly nice in terms of utility, and Entrapment making Tar Trap just whenever it activates its roots everybody for 4 seconds can be an interesting thing, considering that the aforementioned Binding Shot now will actually stun targets, which is debatable if it's good or not. Whether or not it's good, we also have the root mechanic from Tar Trap, which I guess it's kind of like a different thing with both of these abilities. On the surface and just by looking at it for now, it seems like Hunter in general, because obviously this is not just a marksman thing, will have a much varied toolkit of utility, and that's always good. My brain will always want to use Binding Shot to root targets, so we'll see how I can re-educate that part of myself. Now, on the right-hand side, Camouflage and Born to be Wild were swapped as well, bringing Sentinel and its upgrades a little earlier into the tree, like in the 8 talents required space, like just after the first gateway when it comes to the talents. Sentinel is basically the new mechanic and probably what's going to make Hunter more interesting in Dragonflight as well. Serrated Shot is now where Nesingwary Trapping Apparatus was, as it was removed, and what it does right now is Serpent Sting and Bleed damage is increased by 10%. This value is increased by 20% against targets below 30% health, kind of like an execute style, and obviously this goes down into the Steel Trap that does add the bleed on the targets as well. And there are other, I think there's like one more thing that Marksman does with the Master Marksman that applies bleeds to targets, which is still the same, still there in the general talent tree. So hey, you can have some dots as well. And we have a new capstone, a new talent. Actually, it's not a capstone, it's kind of like a semi-capstone just before, which is Arctic Bola with 2 points to, you know, make aimed shots, have a chance to fling an Arctic Bola at your target, dealing a little bit of frost damage and snaring the target by 50% for 3 seconds. The Arctic Bola strikes up to 2 targets. The damage that it does is mediocre, and obviously it can increase with the 2 points that you put in. And it goes into the capstone that has Explosive Shot and Barrage, which is, I mean, it feels like it's more of a utility going into a big DPS cooldown, or one of the 2 big DPS cooldowns for AoE. And I don't know how we feel about that. I think it's the only like second to last row of talents that does not provide an actual proper DPS increase. Although, who knows, maybe with the amount of aim shots that you're gonna fire out, you're gonna have a gazillion Arctic Bolas and you might become a Frost Mage in disguise. On 2 targets anyway. Now, for the spec talents, not a lot has changed, with a couple of improvements, I would say. First of all, Crackshot has been updated. It's really close to the top, just underneath Aim Shot. It's now a 1-point talent, down from a former 2-pointer, and makes obviously Arcane Shot and Chimera Shot focus cost reduced by 20%. This can be particularly good for Chimera Shot, which does a lot of damage, and it used to be a 2-point investment. Now being a 1-pointer gives you a little bit more freedom to pick more stuff here before you get into the second part of the talent tree, stuff like improved Steady Shot, which is probably going to mandatory as we've been able to test it so far. You're pretty focus starved at the beginning of the expansion, what we can assume, before you probably get a decent amount of gear. making improved steady shot a very desired option. And that is even with the changes to the rapid fire talent that now, of course, it generates focus, as it should. You're still going to feel like you need a lot more focus. So all of this is well done into making you make sure that you have all the tools that you need before going forward. And with True Shot, the capstone that it has, one of the capstones, well, it's not really the capstone, but once again, it's like kind of like an upgrade. Eagle Talent's True Focus is now a 2-pointer and was moved instead of calling the shots, which is actually now the capstone with Unerring Visions. Eagle Talent True's Focus makes True Shot last an additional 1.5 seconds and reduces the focus cost of Arcane Shot, Chimera Shot, and Multi-Shot by 12%, and reduces the focus cost of Aim Shot by 12% as well, so you can just fire more things. Once again, into the discussion of that Focus Starve playstyle. When the capstone's right now calling the shots, which it's still the same, every 50 focus spent reduces the cooldown of True Shot by 1.5 seconds, and Unerring Visions while True Shot is active, you gain 1% critical strike chance and 2% increased critical strike damage dealt every 1 second, stack up 10 times. Again, the Unerring Vision being an old BFA Azurite trait. Depending on how the focus economy is going to be on, you might be focused more into Unerring Visions. However, if the focus economy is going to be really good in spending, we might see calling the shot. So it's nice that we have, once again, option to choose in the way that we want our main ability and main cooldown to play out. Wailing Arrow has also slightly been nerfed to now only silent for 3 seconds. So basically, this is the kind of the legendary bow from Sylvanas ability that you would get as a hunter. You fire an enchanted arrow, dealing a bunch of shadow damage to your target and an additional shadow damage to all enemies within 8 yards of your target, and you are silencing them for 3 seconds. And now it has 2 upgrades in the form of capstones. First of all, it's Windrunner's Barrage. Wailing Arrow fires off 5 wind arrows at your primary target, and 10 wind arrows split among any targets and hits in AoE, while Readiness makes Wailing Arrow reset the cooldown of rapid fire and generates 2 charges of aimed shot, giving you an interesting flair and change to rotation. This is actually really interesting. Probably the coolest thing that they've done to marksman in a long time. And finally, because in the initial stages of the alpha and the beta, Wailing Arrow rather was just a slapped in ability. So it's nice to see that they've iterated on it, and it's actually looking really interesting, especially if you wanted to have that Ranger Sylvanas feel, Dark Ranger rather. And the legacy of the Windrunners is all the way on the right-hand side and was changed last time. I don't know exactly when was the last time that we talked about marksmanship. So basically what it does now is makes Aim Shot have a 25% chance to coalesce 3 extra wind arrows that also shoot your target, or at this point 15% of your attack power in physical damage. Modifiers Aim Shot damage also increases the damage of wind arrows, so because you have all those crits and all those extra damage and execute stuff, and so it's pretty good. Windrunner's Guidance is the upgrade and the capstone. Each wind arrow fired has a 3% chance to grant you 10 seconds of True Shot, change from what we had before where it was just a lot of damage with potential crits. Now it has a neat interaction with True Shot, and although we cannot really tell from the tooltip, I would expect and hope that the True Shot version is whatever you buff it with the True Shot buffs on the left hand side, or it could just be a naked True Shot. I guess we'll see, since the tooltip doesn't really indicate that very much. This is pretty much encompassing the major changes of marksman going forward into Dragonflight. It's not a lot, but the things are actually looking slightly better. There's a bunch of improvements, right? Especially for single target, not as much for AoE. So we'll see how this translates going forward, considering that, to be fair, for marksmanship as a whole, it did receive a bunch of AoE upgrades overall throughout the course of the Dragonflight alpha and beta cycle, but the single target has kind of been lackluster. So now that we've seen some improvements to the single target, it feels slightly more complete. Now, we're obviously not talking about the numbers here, since numbers are always subject to change going into what I would imagine is going to be pre-patch in a couple of weeks or a month. We don't know yet. We will see soon. And until then, hopefully the numbers will be adjusted where it looks a lot cooler, because as you know, like kind of like a side note, since we didn't touch about it on it that much this time around, the AoE builds of marksmanship are looking actually pretty cool, with all the neat little interactions that you have with Trickshot from the talent, and how you spend your focus with multi-shot and the upgrades to it. They're all looking really cool. So to be fair, Although I am not overall a big fan of what Hunter's getting in Dragonflight, Marksmanship, in theory, at the very least, is looking to be interesting. We'll see exactly how these all come to play once the Dragonflight is released. And going into the Dragonflight Season 1 could be interesting for Marksman. First of all, we didn't really touch on the tier set right now, so what we know so far about the tier sets as the effect goes, and at the time of recording this, we didn't really have a chance to test them out. They're not yet on the beta. The 2-step bonus makes Arcane Shot and Multi-Shot critical hits cause your next aim shot to cast 50% faster and cause the target to bleed for 20% of the damage dealt over 6 seconds. And I mentioned before all the bleed effects upgrades that we have from the general talent tree. I don't know if this is going to be impacted by it for iterated shots, I believe the name was. We'll see if this will become a thing, because that could be a neat interaction, although it kind of will force you into the talent, and that's not something that the devs said that they want for the tier set to do. They want the tier set to be like slightly unrelated to whatever talent builds that you pick, and I think that's fair since we're getting all these new tools in the talents. We don't really want to feel like the tier set overrides that even more and forces that into a specific build. The 4-step bonus for Marksmanship makes ranged auto attacks have a 10% chance to give your next Arcane Shot or Multi-Shot a 100% chance to critically hit. Now, this is debatable. So first of all, Multi-Shot doesn't really do that much damage, although you're probably still going to use it whenever you want the trick shot, then you cannot get the trick shot from any other source. And I would expect this to apply to Chimera Shot as well, since Chimera Shot is supposed to replace Arcane Shot, so the damage increase can apply to that. That might be better for cleave situations where Chimera Shot shoots 2 targets. It depends exactly on how much this damage translates into sims, because the better this damage buff is, maybe the more haste you'll want, since this definitely procs from ranged auto attacks, although we are not sure yet if it's, you know, specific base proc chance per minute, so it doesn't matter how much haste you have, you'll still limit it to, I don't know, 1 or 2 or 3 procs per minute, as opposed to this just having overall no cap, and maybe we'll see some haste Marksmanship, who knows. But this is how Marksmanship looking. It's not bad, it's not bad, it's actually kind of interesting. It's looking better every time that they're actually adding things to it, buffing and nerfing whatever needs to be buffed and nerfed. So I'm actually kind of okay with Marksmanship right now. So what about you guys? Let us know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you, patrons, for supporting our content, and we will see you in the next one. Bye!
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.